So this is going to be part two. People are still talking about this biracial woman playing Cleopatra on Netflix. And Piers Morgan did an interview with Bassem Youssef, who I don't even know who he is or anything about him, but this very Arab looking man with gray blue eyes and a typical featured very Arab Semitic nose, talking about he's the original Egyptians and that he understands, the plight of African Americans and Afrocentrists and what they're trying to establish in the great civilizations in West Africa, and they should focus on that and not focus on ancient Egypt and culturally appropriating, his culture, right? And I see a bunch of people in the comment section co-signing. A lot of black people, are confused, and it's just the way that we are because we never stay on code. We're just all over the place, even between Republican, conservative. There's always some self-hating black people that basically want the approval of other groups of people. They want to get a pat on the head. They jump up and they co-sign them, and it's just what they do. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at and I'm reading these comments, right? But um the let me say this from the very beginning. It is, I've had some people try to argue in my comment section. No, stop it. Cleopatra was a Macedonian, Greek, whatever the hell that means, you know not uh from Africa, not from the Middle East. She was a Macedonian Greek from the Ptolemaic family dynasty, which was grotesquely inbred. And, she was the last ruler of ancient Egypt, which ended in, 69 AD. That's what it is. You got the statues, you got the bust, you got all that, and we know that the Greeks, came into Egypt. I don't know if it was the Greeks or the Romans, but they came in there because Romans are after the Greeks. But I'm saying, they've been there since like the seventh century. All right, seventh century BC or something like that. Right? So they've been there, right? So at that point, you already know that Egypt is going to, start to become more whitewashed, and all these other groups that have been coming into Egypt over periods of time, trading with them. I mean, ancient Egypt, you have to compare it to modern day New York, right? If we go to New York now, New York, everything is in New York. Everybody from all over the world is in New York. If some ancient excuse me, not ancient, if some future or archaeologists in the future, 10,000 years from now, are digging up bones in cemeteries in New York, they're going to be all over the place. They're going to be like, well, this person was this race, and this person was this race, and this person was this race. We have Asian cemetery, we have a Jewish cemetery. Well, who was the dominant group? Well, we find mostly Caucasian bones, so I guess North America was a Caucasian civilization, right? Completely ignoring the Native Americans that were wiped out. I talked about this before, right? And in my opinion, the same thing goes for ancient Egypt. There's a couple of like fallacies that float around ancient Egypt, like when these Arab Egyptians come through and they go, oh, we're the original people, and they're up there with their Semitic noses and their fair skin and their hazel eyes from the Levant, right? There's a couple fallacies that come up. First off, there's this idea that anytime somebody says that somebody is black, that they have to be of the Idio mean type. They have to be of the Niger Congo type, right? Niger Congo is like it's that West African Bantu look, broad features, flat nose, all that stuff, right? And it completely ignores the eastern part of Africa, which, yes, many of them have also intermingled with Arabs. But when you get to East Africa and you look at the Cushitic people and you look at the Habesha people and the Ethiopian people and all that stuff, right? And you have people trying to really strongly make arguments about an Egyptian mummy, and they're like, oh, and look at the hair and look at the hair texture. Every black person in Africa does not have 4C hair. Every black person in Africa does not have a wide bridged Idi Amin nose. Every black person does not have a face like Tarana Burke or KRS-One, right? But they try to make these sort of fallacious arguments that every black person looks like that. And this is why the East Africans, they get frustrated when talking about, black people as the model, and what African Americans are dealing with in the West when it comes to black beauty, and the way that, Europeans will leap over West Africa, and they'll go to East Africa, and then they'll put the East Africans on a pedestal and say, oh, they're beautiful because their features of all black people are most closely related to us. So, again, there's this constant undermining of the West African phenotype, the West African civilization, West African culture, all that, right? So going back to Bassem Youssef and what he was saying about, there's great West African civilizations, Mali, Timbuktu, Ghanaian Empire, Benin, all this stuff, and black people should focus on that. It's not about that. We don't have to defend that. What is being defended is that the basis, the root of Egyptian culture and civilization is a black civilization. And you see this when you look at the old kingdom, especially again, the ancient Egyptians were a southern oriented people. The when they looked to, where their origins, were from, their origins were from the south. They talked about, what is it, the something of the moon, mountains of the moon, or something like that, in the south, because that is where the Nile River originated. And it's no different than the way that the Hindus in of the Indus Valley, the same way that where do all of their gods live? Their gods live in the Himalayas, the source of the Ganges, or in Indus Valley in the Ganges River, right? They focus on, upstream, because water brings life, water brings civilization, water brings all that stuff. So they look to the source. I think what they believe it like came out of the mouth of a frog, some crazy. But anyway, that's how ancient peoples were oriented. They're like, hey, the river is brings us life, it lets us farm, it lets us do all this stuff. It's, sent down by the gods, and the gods would be where the source of the river was. That's what Egyptians did. Okay. Um, Aside from the fact that if the Nile flows from south to north, and we talked about this before, it flows from the interior of Africa downstream into the Nile Delta, where Cairo, Egypt is, and where Alexandria is, and all that stuff. It flows into the Delta, and so, this notion that you have, this group of people, and that you're going to have them go against the current as opposed to with the current. It's another fallacy that people like to push. um what else? There's something else about the other fallacies that people throw up. Anyway, I can't think of what that other fallacy was. It'll come to me as I'm continuing this conversation. But it's like, here's what Bassem Youssef looks like. Okay. And yet you have all of the other images of ancient Egypt. Even looking at this, I was watching a couple documentaries. These archaeologists, these, standing next to, the paintings, the murals, the images of the ancient Egyptians. I'm like, where does Bassem Youssef look like this? It's amazing how they want to act like, oh, the ancient Egyptians, today's Egyptians, we're so colorful, and we come in all shades and colors, and we are, across the board, we're the spectrum, we're the Crayola box and whatnot. But yet, when you see the depictions of the murals of the ancient Egyptians, it isn't, a spectrum of color. Yes, there are lighter skinned Egyptians. Some of the women are lighter skinned, some of the men are lighter skinned. They did make a distinction between the people who were exceptionally dark versus the people, who were lighter. but them they were still black people. And this is part of the problem when it comes to many of the other groups, these pale skinned people, these unmelanated skinned people of the world, because they don't have a spectrum of color within their group. Emphasize that key phrase, within their group. Black people do have a spectrum of color within their group. Every black person is not blue black. Every black person is not the color of somebody in the Dinka tribe. So aside from whatever casual mixtures have taken place in East Africa and via trade and slavery and all the sorts of things that took place in East Africa. So for these Arab and Caucasian peoples, their whole concept, their whole idea is that when in order to try to justify this notion that ancient Egyptians were different, when you point out the color of the ancient Egyptians, they'll be like, oh, well, they're not as black as the people of Chad, or they're not as black as the people of of the Congo, or something like that, when you can clearly see the equality, the different colors, sometimes you would have a ruler that was dark black. Other times you would have a ruler who was medium brown. Other times you would have a ruler that was fairer but still black, or their partner would be dark and black. I don't even know how they try to sit there and say that, oh, this was a different group. Oh, these were the sub-Saharan Africans, or these were the Nilotic people, or these were the people of Sudanese, or these were people of Nubia, and they're separated and they're different. And they keep trying to make this separation and break Egypt off because it's in North Africa. They want to break it off, and then they want to make the argument about, sub-Saharan Africa and all the sub-Saharan Africans, which again, it has that connotation of subhuman connected to it. And this was the other fallacy that I was going to bring up. You know, the Younger Dryas period was a period about 7,000 years ago at its maximum, where the North Africa was wet and the Sahara Desert wasn't there. All of it was Sahel, which also means that the Congo region, the Congo rainforest and all that, was also expanded because there was more water in the Sahel, and there was more, or when I say the Sahel is basically like an ecosystem where, like, you see giraffes and rhinoceros and all that stuff that you'll see in, like, South Africa and Kenya and on a safari, and there's lions and all that stuff, and zebras and gazelles and all that. That's what was in the Sahel. And you see this in the cave paintings that you can find, in the Sahara. All of these ancient carvings, on the walls, right? That clearly it was wet enough for the animals to be there, right? And then not only that, even when it comes to those that had cattle and were grazing, wet enough for those cattle to be there. When the Younger Dryas period ended, and we entered the phase where we are now, where there's less rain, the plants die, the animals continue to do what? Move further south. Why do they move? Because there's nothing for them to eat. And the humans are going to follow the animals, especially if they're hunting the animals or eating the animals or fishing out of lakes. They're going to move south. And I wish they would just fly over the Sahara with massive, lidar. I know they've found some cities, like the city of Joba, which is in northern Niger, which there's some nomadic tribes that have, they've taken over the area, and they come there every once in a while and they tend to it. But it's basically an abandoned city. Now, the current people that are there now, which are black Africans, they say that that city was built by the Sao civilization. I think it's Sao civilization, which is another ancient African peoples, and that they're no longer there because again, they moved south. The Yoruba tribe that's in Nigeria claims that it hails from ancient Egyptian civilization. So again, when we know that the Sahara was wet at one point, you have water damage on the outside enclosure of the Sphinx, right? And we know that it was a totally different climate, then you have to, recognize that people migrate and people move around. And it was so funny is the Arabs can come into ancient Egypt and spread Islam all across North Africa and into, the lower part of Spain. They can move, when it comes to moving around different regions. But when it comes to Africans and Africans migrating all across the continent of Africa, somehow that doesn't happen. Somehow there's this magical line called sub-Saharan Africa, where the desert is, that black people who are built for the sun suddenly see the desert and go, oh no, we can't cross that, we can't go into that territory, even though you've had massive amounts of trade between North Africa and South Africa, especially when it comes to the salt mines. After all of that, the water dried up, and because of, essentially climate change, and then the Arabs came in later. So they constantly make this argument about, the sub-Saharan model. The other thing is, black people are the most ancient people. We are the first people. And people really can't wrap their heads around that, like in terms of a timeline, right? This guy, Bassem Youssef, is saying that he's the original ancient Egyptians, right? Which we already know that that's false, because when you look at the monuments, the murals, when you look at the images, when you look at the stone, carved heads and whatnot, you do not see his feature set, right? And I posted this on my community tab for people to really understand, that the timelines that we've been given, which they don't like adjusting because it takes religion and flips it on its head, especially Christianity, with its, oh, the earth is only 6,000 years old and the earth was only made in 7 days, and the ridiculousness of religion. See, every time they move the timeline back because people are, being archaeologists and digging some shit up, they like the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, they have to adjust to that. Right? Then they start talking foolishness and nonsense and saying, well, it didn't really mean 6,000 years. It's actually every year in ancient times, every year is 1,000 year period. So that's what they really meant when they were discussing the Bible. And people lived much longer than that, in the Bible. People could live 5,000 years easy in the Bible because, magic, God and magic, right? So they start doing all type of shit to try to get around, these sorts of timelines. But things keep getting pushed back because of things that are, currently being discovered, like Gobekli Tepe, and that's 12,000 years old, 12,500 years old, right? And that it was intentionally buried, and so like it starts, things start really getting changed in terms of what our concept of time is. And like example, I pulled up an image of the Jarawa people, right? Because we all know that Africans at one point, they left Africa, followed either land bridges or just simply followed the coast, caught in their little canoes or whatever, or their little ships, and followed the coast and went all the way down to Australia, which is why you have a whole ring of nothing but melanated people. You have a whole ring of nothing but melanated people, all the way from the eastern part of Africa all the way to Australia, even going into the Melanesians and people of Fiji. Google what the people of Fiji look like. Okay, and even going as far as Hawaii, and rumors about them talking about, we're sending reinforcements to Africa and all this other stuff about where their origins. People, had origin stories about where they came from. You have the Negritos in the Philippines. Black people are an ancient people. So I pulled up the little image of the Jarwa. Y'all remember the Jarwa? They live on North Sentinel Island. It's in the Bay of Bengal, on the other side of India. Okay, it's not in the, what is that? Not the Arabian Sea. What sea is that? I forget what sea is that, but it's not on the eastern side, or excuse me, the western side of India. It's on the eastern side of India. like where like on the other side of that is like Miramar and all that stuff, right? So this is where the Jarawa people are, right? And we know what the Jarawa people look like. Google the Jarawa people, Jawara, I think is how you spell it. The Jarawa people look like black people. That's what they look like. All right. And I'm not even going to get into the origins of the Dravidian people, and because Indians are even having these conversations constantly. They're trying to do the same crap that the Egyptians do. We're the original people and the different there's no distinction and we're all Indian and this, that, and third, even though the Dravidian languages, the languages like Tamil and what is it? Tugalu, all these other Indian languages are different from Hindi, and different from the Afghans. And again, Alexander the Great, Alexander came in and changed the name in Egypt. Oh, this is my city, Alexandria, and went all the way to India and died in India. Okay, they got a population in Pakistan that have they've done the DNA and ancestry. They have blue eyes and whatnot, and saying that this is where a number of Alexander's the Great people they just freaking settled there. He died. They settled there. I'm like, I ain't going all. I'm only going to walk all the way back to Europe. Nah, like hell no. You know what I mean? So they stayed there, right? With their campaigns and everything, empires expanding themselves too far. But anyway, I'm saying the Jarwa. You go on Google, they say the Jarwa have been there for 55,000 years. This is just the Jarwa. This isn't even talking about the rest of Africa. And just to put shit into context, right? The Jarwa have been on Sentinel Island for 55,000 years, right? Neanderthal were roaming the earth 30,000 years ago. 30,000 years ago, right? The last woolly mammoth, right, went extinct somewhere in Siberia 10,000 years ago. Okay? Right? So think about the Europeans walking around, Homo sapiens interacting with Neanderthal. Okay? Black people been here. Been here. Been here. Okay. Then not only that, got all these white supremacists running around talking about blue eyes and you see this pure white baby and we're the Aryan race and all this other stuff. Blue eyes didn't even come into existence until 6 to 10,000 years ago. Black people been here, been here. Everybody else spawns from us. But again, the people can't conceptualize these ancient timelines. And so here you have monuments, structures that are ancient. And essentially the only people that would have been here in large part would have been black people, right? Because everybody else would have had to evolve from black people first and been outside of Africa long enough to turn into something else, right? In order to come back and then claim that they're going to claim whatever ancient civilization and say that it's them and that they're a separate group now from black people. I'm like, you got to evolve from black people first in order to do that. So and let me put this on the table. I am fully open to the Graham Hancock model of, like the Matrix, with this whole, this great reset, this whole, Earth going through not only climactic change, but, mass level, extinction events, whether it's volcanoes, whether it's asteroids, all that stuff. I'll even put on the table that that the what do you want to call it, whatever the first dynasty of Egypt was, right? Whatever the black people came out of Uganda and went up the Nile, that maybe those pyramids were there when they got there because that was from a previous cataclysm. But in my opinion, those people still would have been black. So you have black group A that gets wiped out, knowledge disappears, and then black group B comes through and discovers it. This is the same argument that's being made about when they go over there and they look at the monuments in Pumupuku, and they look at they look at the base stones, or those big giant megalithic stones that are like twice the size of a human person, and then on top of that they have the little pebbles that the second civilization came in and built upon the first foundation, right? If I was an ancient man and those pyramids had been there, you know what I mean? I'd be like, oh yeah, we're going to move in. And so here you have group again, black group B claiming the civilization of black group A that is no longer here anymore, and why that knowledge is not passed on. And you see this when you look at the progression of these civilizations, where things seem to regress over time, right? Like the highest precision, because I've watched a bunch of these videos. Okay, the precision. I don't care what anybody says. Whoever built the pyramids, whoever built any of these structures, they had power tools. Okay, I've seen enough videos. I've seen enough precision that I'm like, that cannot be done with anything other than power tools. So they had power tools. Where's the power tools? Don't know. We don't know where the power tools are, but they had power tools. Especially when you get into stuff like the stone pottery. I mean, pottery that's literally made out of stone, right? You see the same thing when they have the pillars in India that clearly were made with a lathe. Clearly, they took the pillar, rotated that shit, and basically had, I don't know if you know what a lathe is, but it's basically, as you're rotating, you're carving away. It's like an ancient CNC machine. You're carving away angles, you're digging in, moving out, digging in, and it causes there to be grooves and all that other stuff, right? I am all for the ancient global civilization that was wiped out, whether people want to say it was the flood, it was all that stuff, whatever people want to say. That I can still put that on the table. But ancient Egypt is still going to be rooted in a black civilization. And even if we want to start with whoever the ancient Egyptians were that painted all these murals and whatnot, let's say that they weren't as sophisticated as whatever previous civilization may have came before. I'm saying what the ancient Egyptians that are excuse me, what the Egyptians that are these Arab invaders and settlers have come in and are claiming now. I'm like, you're still pointing to a black civilization that came before you. See, all of this is rooted in racism. I don't care what anybody says. The white people and the Arabs are in cahoots with each other, because these are both groups that have enslaved black people and see black people as inferior. And in order to justify their superior over black people, they cannot have a high ancient civilization that predates them. Okay, they are literally Dr. Zaius in Planet of the Apes. Okay, they do not want to acknowledge that the humans can speak. They do not want to acknowledge that the humans became before them. Because that was the whole premise of with Dr. Zaius and Planet of the Apes. I mean, it was an allegory of racism and white supremacy. I talked about this, in my previous video. And the Arabs want to come through and they want to say, "Oh, this is our civilization." You don't look like any of the people on the walls, dude. You look like any other people. It's not until the Greeks come in there and the Romans come in there that you start seeing these Caucasian looking people, and you can clearly see that they're bringing their Greek and their Roman style of paintings and their Roman style of art and the way that they do things, because it doesn't look like what the ancient Egyptians had. It doesn't look anything like that. Even the materials that they cut, that they cut from, like the ancient Egyptians, they're cutting from diorite, which is right there up on the hardness scale. I think, what is it, the Hoover hardness scale? What's the hardness scale called? But anyway, the hardness scale, which is right next to diamond. And here you got the Greeks, they come in like, oh, let me carve this marble, which is like right there with like limestone, sandstone, and chalk, and trying to claim, oh, it's the same high civilization. Bullshit. Bullshit. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody truly knows how any of this stuff was created. But the first people to be there, the first people to get there, black people. Now, I don't know how far back we're going. Are we going back 15,000 years? Are we going back 30,000 years? How far back are we going? Nobody knows because you can't carbon date stone. You can only carbon date organic material. But the way what is happening, this is why they try to do that sub-Saharan bullshit. What's happening is, no, there's just no way that black people, could have created this. There's just no way, because I mean, look how primitive they are now. Like I said, they try to do the same bullshit in with Angkor Wat in Cambodia, right? You look at Cambodia. I mean, you could go to Cambodia now, and it ain't nothing but peasant farmers. You can go to, I mean, all of that Indochina area, and there's tons of megalithic structures and great, these like I don't know what you want to call them. Like they're not pyramids, but they're like these big megalithic like dome like structures and whatnot. There's all type of structures in Southeast Asia, right? But Southeast Asia, all we picture is the dude with the Raiden hat putting rice in the ground with some sandals, right? With an AK-47 and Ho Chi Minh telling them what to do. Like that's all we can picture when we picture Southeast Asia. Like people really don't understand, like that something happened, some knowledge was lost all across the globe, and that's what it was. But to sit there and act like the people that have been there forever are those aren't the people, that's retarded. Like I said, that white guy, went over to Cambodia, literally saw Angkor Wat, and was like, "This had to be a ancient European civilization because Europeans don't have shit in Europe that matches all of the megalithic structures that are outside of Europe." Which is why freaking white supremacy can't even stand on its own rhetoric. Where are the megalithic structures in Europe? Stonehenge? You're going to say that Stonehenge is more impressive than the Ellora Caves or Angkor Wat or Pumupuku or Machu Picchu or the pyramids of Giza? The fuck out of here. The fuck out of here. And see, again, they've painted this whole the main thing that Europeans have done is running around the world, rape, pillaging, and plundering everybody else. What Europeans are awesome at is their propensity to violence and snuffing out other groups of people. Their propensity to weapons of mass destruction. And what they want is they want that high society. And having the Greeks and the Romans get their knowledge from a black civilization. Oh no, we can't have that. We got to name, oh, this is Pythagorean theorem. And here you got the Egyptians building in the shapes of pyramids that clearly have the angles of Pythagorean theorem. Like it's just insane the way that, white supremacy and even Arab supremacy, who are the cousins of, the white folks and the system of white supremacy, trying to push these sorts of ideas of black inferiority, and white domination and white skinned or pale skinned superiority. I mean, this man does not look like the ancient Egyptians. And notice, like, whenever they pull up these images online of ancient Egyptians, you notice how they try to find you the whitest Egyptians, right? You really got to like dive in on Google, right? And people have taken more pictures now, so it's all over the place, right? But ever since I was a child, they always showing all these white Egyptians. They all, the Charlton Heston playing Moses, right? And this is a funny thing, right? Because and I'm not going to say that the Egyptians haven't filed complaints about Europeans playing the Egyptians, in their movies. And this goes back to what I talk about with black people and the our own lack of representation. Nobody is going to represent you better than you can represent yourself. You have to understand. This is why you have to control your own media. Okay. And unfortunately, Hollywood and the big budget films and all that stuff, white people in America have dominated that. White people and Jewish people, they've dominated that. So they get to put out the images out there that get burned into everybody's, mind, get burned into everybody's retina. And so what they put out there is what people believe. So on that note, I agree with Bassem Youssef. But see, the problem that I have is he's up there on Pierce Morgan. Everybody's jumping up and down about this woman playing, Cleopatra. Which again, I wish that she didn't. I'm like, you could have played any of black pharaohs or pharaohesses and or whatever, but no, didn't do that. Again, in my opinion, this was a folly. This was a misstep. This shouldn't have been done. But that still does not change the fact that ancient Egypt was a black civilization. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit here and defend the what can't be defended, the ridiculous, in order to try to make a point, because all that's going to do is undermine my integrity when it comes to making the argument about ancient Egypt being a black civilization. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying about the Hollywood and all that, I haven't heard ancient Egyptians kick up as, or excuse me, not ancient Egyptians, today's modern Egyptians kick up as much dust as they're kicking up now about this woman being depicted as black, uh, when versus when they're over there talking about uh when a woman is, or excuse me, not the woman, when these movies are portraying white actors playing these parts. You know, again, Prince of Egypt, and what was the other movie? Something about the gods, and it had Russell Crowe and Christian Bale and all this other shit, right? I didn't see this type of backlash when the idea when these Caucasian people are playing these Egyptian roles. But when you have this mixed woman, not even full black, biracial woman is playing this role, all of a sudden she's the blackest woman in the world, right? And now I see why Captain Solo was talking about how biracial women and mixed women, why they run and flee and flock to black men, because you can see that there is no value when it comes to biracial and mixed women. There's no value there. You know what I mean? They quickly just a black, 50% Caucasian, black. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's not like they had Viola Davis playing Cleopatra. They got this woman playing Cleopatra, and she is biracial, but they're still looking at her as black. You see, and so like the whole we come in the spectrum and all this, and ancient Egyptians aren't white or black, and this, that, and third. But you see how they quickly funnel it into the category of black and dismiss it and don't identify with it. You know, right? But again, I didn't hear this much smoke when it came to all these movies that for decades have been portraying ancient Egyptians, as white. And like I said before, ancient Egypt, you got all these murals. Every time I see these murals of ancient Egyptian, rarely, even when they're working outside, fishing, freaking grabbing grapes for wine, harvesting wheat, they're all out there with no shirt on, just out there in the African sun. And yet you got Egyptian tour guides, they got to wear sunglasses. You got Egyptian tour guides, they got to wear the kufiya on their head because it might burn my little skin, might burn my skin. I don't want my skin to get burned. They can't be out there. They over there just sweating up a storm, wiping off the sweat off their forehead. I'm like, you ain't built for this shit. Ancient Egyptian murals, no shirt on. I'm like, you can't get any more blatantly obvious than this. The sun literally kills these people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like planet Earth hates your ass. And yet they will sit there, oh, this is us. Whether it's these Arabs from the Levant, or whether it's these white people from Europe. Y'all can't and it, mind you, they actually want to sit up there and have arguments about global warming, and I'm like, if there is global warming, it's only going to kill your ass. You know what I mean? If malaria, you find malaria in Germany in the year 2065, I'm like, guess who ain't built for malaria, right? When it comes to the planet being heated up, and temperatures jumping 5 degrees. I'm like, you ain't built for that. You not built for that. But yet they're sitting there arguing. You would think that Europeans especially, they would be trying to keep the planet as cold as possible. As cold as possible, right? It's like it should be a refrigerator in this bitch. No, 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 no. No, we must, put, greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We don't care. You know what I mean? Like this shit is just crazy when you really look at it, and you look at, how these folks are trying to claim Egypt, and I'm like, you're not built for this shit, right? You see all these ancient Egyptians, they show dark skin and they show jet black hair. That's what you see. And like I said, even when it comes to the texture, not all East Africans have 4C hair. I mean, these areas, and that's another thing. Like people really try to separate out Africa, in order to try to justify whatever argument that they're trying to make. You know what I mean? Like there are people in East Africa that have West African features. There are people in East Africa that have 4C hair. There are people in East Africa that are blue black, jet black, right? And there's also people in East Africa that have looser texture hair. And again, like the crazy part is, even when you look at these images of these, the what do you want to call it, the Saharan diaspora, all these people that I strongly believe, when the Arab invaders came in, and the fact that the area dried up due to the end of the Younger Dryas period, and the animals left, the animals moved further south, and the cattle, they couldn't graze in what is now, the desertification of the soil. They couldn't graze in those areas, so they moved south. They moved into wetter climates, right? And when you look at those groups of people, when you look at how the women style their hair, when you look at how the women wear the jewelry, and then you look at the ancient images of the Egyptians, you see the same style, you see the same jewelry, you see the same thing. These are not Arab styles. And then on top of that, like even when it comes to Arabs, like I saw somebody's comment, they were like, and that's the whole thing. Like, look at how hard in the paint these Egyptians are going to defend the idea of um of Cleopatra being this Greek Macedonian, right? It's like, I'm like, that's not your fight, right? But that's because they identify more with the Caucasian feature set than they do with the black feature set, right? So that's why they're doing it. But I'm like, I see all these videos, Arab girls, in their hijab up there talking about, oh, and she was from the Ptolemaic dynasty, and they're just going super hard in the paint. And like one comment I saw is like, yeah, I agree, she wasn't black and she was Greek, but guess what? She wasn't Muslim either, chick. And that's the whole thing. Like, it was so funny with the ancient Egyptians, right? Or not the ancient Egyptians. What's so funny with the Egyptians is, like, the current Egyptians, Arab invaders, Arab, Greek, Roman. What other groups came in there? The Turks. These people. What's so funny is the one of the Egyptian chicks that I dated. She her background. She had Turkish in her background. Her grandmother was Turkish. All these people came in because once you become a Muslim country, like, everybody else can just come in there all willy nilly because Islam, right? But what does it say in the Quran when it comes to idolatry? Right. This is why, like, these people don't value anything. There's an element of white supremacy here because they want to claim it. When they discovered the Sphinx was covered up to its neck in sand. Okay, all this stuff was just abandoned. They didn't give a fuck about that shit. It wasn't until the white European went in there and discovered it, and then look at the greatness. Oh, look at the greatness of the, and then the Europeans try to claim it for themselves, and then the current modern day Egyptians recognized the value of the shit, and then they wanted to claim it for themselves. You see, but I'm saying Muslims have a really bad a habit of not preserving ancient monuments and ancient artifacts because they don't believe in idolatry. This is the whole issue with ISIS that went into Baghdad and all those, the lion, was it the human headed lion slash griffin thing, with the wings and all that other shit, that was supposed to be outside the gates of Babylon. The ISIS went in there and destroyed all that shit. They went in there and just like, and even in Al Qaeda in what was it now was it Afghanistan or Pakistan, Afghanistan Pakistan border, they had the big giant statue of Buddha and they blew that shit up with some TNT. You got, only thing you can do now is go on Google and look at the giant Buddha statue. Going back to what I said about Muhammad bin Ibn Qasim, and him going into India and Pakistan in battle formation to enslave those groups of, not enslave, to freaking basically control that region. And people want to say Islam is a religion of peace, and I'm like, this dude is in battle formations and went in there and freaking toppled and oppressed those people, and were like, yeah, you need to convert, and if you don't convert, then here's my Aladdin sword, swing. What I mean? And yet, these people literally, the people of Pakistan, the people of the Pakistan Afghanistan border, they were all Buddhists. They were Buddhists. They were minding their business. That was their history and that was their culture. Islam comes in and basically tells them, this ain't shit, and destroys their monuments and destroys their heritage and destroys their culture. And I'm like, and here you got the Pakistani people. You adopted the culture of people that have nothing but contempt for you. These damn Arabs, they have nothing but contempt for you. You go over to Dubai and they get the Pakistani people to go there and they living in these slum conditions to be the worker bees to build their skyscrapers and shit like that. And yet you over there sitting talking about Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. This shit is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The Arabs come in, the Arabs don't respect shit. They don't respect shit, and it kills me the way that everybody that all these people, these Arabized non-Arab peoples, they get so caught up in Islam that they don't realize how Islam comes in and literally destroys whatever culture it comes in contact with, and says that Islam is the only way to be. People try to, they try to separate it. Oh, no, 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 Islam. And again, we got tons of Arabized blacks, and we got tons of, even when it comes to the North Africans, the Amazons or whatever, the people of the Maghreb and everything else like that. They don't speak Arabic. They, fortunately for them, many of them were able to keep their language. But again, the Arabs come in and they destroy culture. They destroy culture. They were the Russia, of ancient times. They come through and you must speak Russian and you must, become a Stalinistic person and all that other shit. That's what they did. You know what I mean? But yet these people are going to sit there and act like, oh, we're the original people and we value our culture and everything. No, you only value it because white people valued it first, and white people tried to claim it for themselves first. And you realize how much that's a tool that is used to uplift them as a society. On top of the fact, and let me throw this out there, you got to look at the billions of dollars that Egyptians get from this, the pyramids and the ancient monuments and all that other stuff, the tourism, all that shit. Could you just imagine if they had to acknowledge that ancient Egypt was a black civilization? It is not their culture. It is not their civilization. Because what I've seen is, I've seen these people, you watch these videos, they don't know what they're talking about. They, again, they want to tell you the pyramids of Giza, they were tombs and all this other stuff, but yet there were no sarcophaguses found, in the pyramids and whatnot. Not to say that no pyramids were used as tombs. The ones in Sudan were used as tombs, but the Pyramid of Giza, I'm more inclined to go with the whole power generator, thing, the whole, Tesla, projecting energy in the atmosphere. I don't know what the pyramids were used for, but neither do these Egyptians have any concept. They just sit there and they make shit up. It's like, yo, this doesn't make any sense. And this pyramid was built for the Pharaoh Khufu. You know what I mean? And they just making shit up. So there's like one stone like on the ceiling, like when you go in the pyramid, like in one of the rooms, I think it's like the Queen's Chamber or some shit like that, and it says Khufu, at the top, like somebody put it in there with paint. And I'm saying all this stuff. The ancient Egypt has been bastardized so much over the millennia, it's not even funny. All motherfuckers came in, they quarry, these are supposed to be tombs, but yet, they quarried the stones, from the pyramids. These are supposed to be tombs, and yeah, all the casing stones, are gone. And then they got this whole weird thing that's going on with the quartz, and they got quartz stone there, and there's a whole because whenever they show you these pictures of ancient Egypt, and they show you the monuments, they always show, oh yeah, look at the pyramids and everything. There's way more interesting shit about ancient Egypt, and some of the stuff and the artifacts, and how did they do that, and what's this deal with quartz, and why is this so important, or why was this here? And you could see where things were clearly removed. I mean, just I mean, it's just it's a whole thing. It's just it's baffling, that you have people who claim to, like, as though they're ancient Egyptian and they know exactly what everything was used for, but they don't. They don't. Again, this shit was buried. The Egyptians have just as much knowledge as the Europeans do. You know what I mean? The only person I would say that has more extensive knowledge would be Zahi Hawass. But again, he wants to play Dr. Zaius. He wants to, oh no, you can't go in there. Oh no, you can't. We don't want you to see this and want you to see that. Again, if it's truly, they want to say, oh well, we don't want to let these people in because they'll bastardize our history and everything. I don't think that's what it is. No, they know it's not their history. And there's certain things that Zahi Hawass has seen where he knows it's not their history. And he doesn't want to let outsiders come in and change the current narrative that the current modern day Egyptians are trying to push. All these antiquities ministries and all of that. They again, $1 billion industry. Billions of dollars that they get from sitting there and tourism and telling people it's a bunch of bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, how do you think the Europeans even got all these monuments, the obelisk and the Vatican and everything? Because the ancient Egyptians, they didn't give a fuck about that shit. Either that or in combination with being powerless to stop the Europeans from taking it anyway. You know what I mean? So it's just funny to me how they're so serious about their Egyptian history and whatnot, but again, didn't care about it until the Europeans show up. Like I said, the black people, they left the shit because they couldn't live there. They couldn't stay there. Yes, you have the people that stayed around the Nile and whatnot, but you got to think about like if it was wetter up there, if it was wetter during the younger dryas periods, which we know that it was, you got to think about how far the Egypt spread out, like Cairo spread out, and all these other cities like Aswan and whatnot, where the quarries were, how far they spread out into what is now desert. How far they spread out. The current Nile River Valley reminds me of Miami, Florida, like South Florida, because everything west of 95 is all Everglades. Like, you look at Florida and from like the satellite, and you think like, oh, you can live in all that area. Like, no, if you actually look at the metropolitan areas of Southern Florida, this is why the real estate is so expensive down there. They can only live basically east of 95 because everything west of 95 is Everglades all the way until you get to freaking Tampa. It's all Everglades. All that is a massive, what do you want to call that shit? It's not an aquifer. It's like a massive, they got like all this shit that they got to deal with, flooding and everything else like that. But, it's only a narrow strip, when it comes to South Florida. I mean, it's a very narrow strip that people, are living on in South Florida. Everything is just on the East Coast. There's nothing, in South Florida, in the West. And if you look at a satellite of Florida at nighttime, you'll see this. All that area that's dark, Everglades. And so the Nile is like the same thing to me. It's like you can only live here because, the rest of it is desert. And in 7,000 years or 5,000 years, when the tilt of the earth shifts again, You know what I mean? You'll see the expansion of the rainforest in the Congo, and you'll see, animals moving north into, what will now be the Sahel and not be the Sahara Desert. And then, that the Sahara Desert, I don't know if you know about all the, how, the Sahara Desert basically fertilizes the Amazon rainforest. And I'm like, well, what'll happen to the Amazon? You know what I mean? Like all this stuff. But it just blows my mind the way the mental gymnastics that people are using, when it comes to, ancient Egypt and the history and the images. I mean, I've never seen such dodging. Same thing I said about the Olmec heads. You got the Olmec heads. If the Olmec head got up and robbed a bank, everybody would be like, "Oh, that's black man. That's black man all day." Soon as we get to antiquity, all of a sudden people don't know what black people look like. All of a sudden people are colorist as hell. We don't want no dark skin anywhere around us. Da 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 da. The colorist as hell. As soon as we get to ancient Egypt, well, actually, that's not really dark skin. That's actually more of a clay color. That's actually more of a beige. That's actually more like all of a sudden they start trying to recategorize shit. Again, the lips, the subnasal prognathism, the dark skin, the texture of hair, it's all there. And yet you still have these gray-eyed Arabs coming through saying this is our ancient Egyptian history. You're like bullshit. Bullshit. We know West Africa has its own civilization, right? We know that. But ancient Egypt, right? It being the most awesome, right? That was just like how freaking Northern Europeans try to claim, they try to claim Rome and Greece for the category of whiteness. And see, that's another thing because if you take away, I could say the same thing to him. That's real funny. I could say the same thing to Arabs. I'm like, why don't you go up there and claim, Babylonia? Why don't you claim the ziggurats in the Middle East and whatnot? I don't know what they got going on in the Levant, the stone of the pregnant woman. Go claim that shit. You know what I mean? You see, everybody's running around trying to claim, that their greatness so that they're not the culture that ain't shit. Like the Chinese, they want to talk about, the whatever, what is it that all those stone warriors that they have, and whatnot. The Chinese got a whole, they got a whole, pyramids, and they got a whole bunch of mounds and ancient emperors, stuff that was buried in it. They got all that, right? The Europeans are going to try to claim all of Greece and Rome, even the Nordic people that ain't even got nothing to do with that, right? The Africans, they're going to try to claim ancient Egypt, and now you got the basically three groups of people fighting over Egypt to claim its greatness. Right, the Mexicans, they're cool because they're like, yo, don't even try to claim our shit because y'all motherfuckers didn't even know we were over here till the 1400s. So the Mexicans are like, yeah, we're claiming this shit, right? Which, like I said, is really ironic because today's Mexicans aren't the original Aztec people. Those people were essentially wiped out with smallpox and genocide and starvation coming from the Spaniards. But now you have these half-breed mestizo Mexicans that are claiming that that's their history. It's really weird. Like when you have like one ancestor come through and rape another ancestor, and then they produce children, and then the children are simultaneously trying to defend and protect both sides. Right? Isn't that some weird shit? That's some weird shit. You know what I mean? Like it's just weird, But anyway, but it's not even, to me, I'm not even tripping about that because that is human history. You have winners and you have losers, and most people don't get completely genocided and wiped out. Most people just simply blend and mesh and meld into whatever population, that is conquering them, or they move and they relocate and they go south or they go somewhere else. But the crazy part to me is how somebody's going to come through and then try to claim somebody else's shit. You know what I mean? Like it's like even though the images and the depictions and the self documentation is there, like that's the crazy part to me. Again, like I said before, it's like white Europeans coming to North America, and putting teepees in their museum and tomahawks in the museum and claiming that that is ancient European history and that North America has always been Caucasian, a Caucasian civilization, and these are the artifacts of ancient Europeans. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're saying that Europeans from Europe came to America, bumped into some other Europeans, and decided that they were going to genocide them and wipe them out to take over their lands? What, huh? You're not even making sense at that point. But literally, this is what the current today modern Egyptians are doing. With their gonzo hook noses and whatnot. And I'm like, where are these gonzo hook noses? Where are these noses in ancient Egypt? Where do we see this shit? We don't see this shit. We see them in the New Kingdom mummies, but we don't see them in the Old Kingdom. We don't see them. So I mean, it's like miss me with that. But these are the arguments that they try to make. This is the agenda that they try to push, and it's just again, I'm so glad that out of all people, African Americans are pushing back on it because we understand white supremacy. We understand Arab supremacy. We understand it. And this is why a lot of us look at you black people in Africa with a side eye. You all want to claim, oh, you know your culture and you know your identity and everything, but you don't look at the bigger picture of global white supremacy and global Arab supremacy. You don't look at the bigger picture. You got y'all writing comments. Oh, we're West African, and I don't see why it matters. This East Africa, and blah 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 blah. I don't even know why even the Cushitic people and the people of which would have been Kemet and the people of Punt don't push back and recognize what is being stripped from them, whatever their involvement it was, in the territory. Again, if that was the New York City of ancient times, everybody was involved in that shit. And again, I'm not trying to discredit or dismiss the involvement of the people of the Levant or the people of, who came in, as traders and not on some disrespectful shit and went there to learn. I mean, Herodotus and all these Greek, scholars went there. They didn't go there with any disrespect. The disrespect of black people didn't start until after the discovery of the New World. And again, when you go and you look at the way that black people were depicted during the Renaissance, the way that black people were depicted in ancient times, the way that they were recognized as people who brought knowledge, you see this. The Arabs were not recognized as that. Why weren't the Arabs recognized? How come Europeans aren't walking around with these pins on their chest, of Arabs? How come they're not walking around with that? Not saying that the Arabs didn't bring knowledge, but the knowledge is the knowledge that is being given acknowledgement to is the knowledge that came from the Africans, not from the Arabs, but from the Africans. Why is that? And you see, so this is where when you put all of it together and you look at it objectively, you see that there is this attempt to erase African peoples, from the history books as not accomplishing anything. We're going to draw this magical line, call it sub-Saharan Africa. There's nothing down there to see. They have no civilization. They're next to monkeys. I mean, they lived in mud huts. They didn't create anything, didn't produce anything. Have no written language, nothing, and there's just nothing. There's nothing to see here. Because all of civilization comes from whiteness and proxies to whiteness, and that's what it is. And so for all the other black people that are in Africa that don't get why African Americans are getting are big on this issue, is because we understand how white supremacy and how Arab supremacy, we understand how that shit works. Y'all are over there still trying to be accepted by Arabs, still trying to be accepted by Europeans, and claim that we're not like them niggas in America. We see the crime on the 6 o'clock news and all that other stuff and how they behave and how they act, completely ignoring the context of the ways in which African Americans were they tried to destroy us and continuously try to destroy us. Both psychologically, economically, financially, politically, all that shit. But y'all in Africa, y'all don't get it. A lot of y'all don't have the knowledge. You don't have, the information. You don't have access to the internet. You know what I mean? A lot of you all don't. And so like you guys are like way behind. We're like 20 years ahead of you, 50 years ahead of you in terms of the knowledge that we have about, the culture, the history, all this stuff, the things that they try to do. Even if you want to say, "Oh, well, you know more about the culture." Okay, fine. But you don't pay attention to the things that they try to do, the erasure that they try to do. You got freaking King Tut's, the bust of King Tut's mother, Queen T. And yet when they do that Discovery Channel bullshit, and they were like, "Oh, and this is what King Tut looked like," and they show you this buck tooth, Arab looking dude, and call it good. And people are still running around with that image of the shit, even though that's not how King Tut was depicted himself. That's not how the artist depicted King Tut, the ancient Egyptian artist. You know what I mean? The ancient Egyptians known for their accuracy and their precision, and all of a sudden they don't know how to depict themselves. Doesn't make any sense. But these are the type of arguments that are made. This is the type of agenda, that is pushed, and it needs to be pushed back against. Sorry, not sorry if today's modern Egyptians, want to get into their fields. It's not your history. It's not even showcased on the walls. You all came later. You all came as Arab invaders, Mister Bassem Youssef. You all came later. There's nobody who looks like you. Show me the murals where the people look like you. And again, he's going to show me some new kingdom images. He's not going to show me the root of the civilization. He's going to show me, the last, freaking, couple hundred years of ancient Egyptian civilization, when we already know that, the black people were fleeing and leaving, and ancient Egypt was basically drying up, and all of the surrounding areas, people were like, "Yeah, we can't stay here. We can't stay here." And then you throw it, the freaking Arabs came in the 600s. They came in 600 AD. Actually 632, with Islam. That's when the real Arab invasion came. But I'm not saying that Arabs, hadn't been there before, because there's no way that you're going to live in the Levant and you have travelers and nobody's going to hear about ancient Egypt. There's just no way. There's no way that that's going to happen. But anyway, I had to get this off my chest because, I seen Bassem Youssef go up on, Piers Morgan. I'm sitting there, I'm watching this shit, and I'm just like, here we go. And then you got a whole bunch of people in the comment section co-signing. The anti-blackness in the world is real. This is what black people have to understand. It is real. Nobody wants black people to be awesome. Nobody wants black people to be the starting point for anything, even though we're the most ancient people. Like, there's still people trying to push back on the idea that the oldest bones, that have been found, come from black people. The oldest Homo sapien bones come from, they still trying to push back on that. The idea that a white Scandinavian woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, that her point of origin on this planet starts with a black woman. Like, they don't know. No, they cannot. They just refuse. They refuse because it fucks with their sensitivities of white supremacy and all that other shit. So anyway, that's all I gotta say. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.